use English because as I survey the audience, seems like most people are easy with English. Timorese, also Portuguese here. Time to time I will do a summary in Tetum for those who are less fluent on English. Thank you all for coming again to this humble building to once again participate in a conversation. Sometimes there is one-way conversation on one issue that is extremely important to Timor-Leste, and that is our regional integration, relationships, and ASEAN accession effort process. But today the main speaker actually will be Deputy Foreign Minister Milena Rangel, Deputy Foreign Minister for ASEAN. So the nice constitutional government is the first one that in 21 years of our independence create a portfolio of Deputy Foreign Minister for ASEAN. I just went to Jakarta on a private visit, invitation of Jakarta Post. And why I accepted an invitation to a newspaper's anniversary? Well, because the Jakarta Post is the only, and not the only one, but is the main oldest English language newspaper in Indonesia. And I happen to know the founding director, president of Jakarta Post, Sabang Siagian, the late Sabang Siagian. When he was not even, when Jakarta Post had not yet existed, and when Sabang Siagian was a senior editor at Sinar Harapan. Back then, in the 70s, there were two major daily newspapers in Indonesia, or at least the ones I knew. One was Kompas, the other one Sinar Harapan. And Sabang Siagian was a senior writer in Jakarta Post. My first trip ever to Jakarta, not to Indonesia, to Jakarta, because I went many times to Kupang, NTT, when I was in my 19th, 20, 21, organizing very, I say, trivial activities, bring in not anything major statecraft initiatives, bring in accompanying soccer teams from Dili to Kupang. In NTT, they didn't have any civilian soccer team. The whole soccer team in NTT were military people, the only ones who played soccer a bit better. And then also help organizing teams from NTT to Dili to play soccer here. They're all military. And where did they stay? We set up sleeping quarters in what was then Benfica Soccer Club, in a big room like this, beds for everybody. They were being military, so they were used to sleeping in the same common room, and they're quite comfortable. But also cultural activities, Timorese cultural activities to Kupang, and Kupang to Dili. I remember some in East Timor at that time, at the time, fell in love with two artists who came from Kupang. One is called Judy, the other one Marlisi. And I know exactly who fell in love with who at the time. Me, I was too young, so no one paid attention to me. So I'm out of the list. And then a second group, a bit more sophisticated, came from Surabaya. That not only fell in love, but went crazy. And one was Ervina. That was the first time a major rock singer came from Indonesia with miniskirts. And at the time, Timor-Leste, every skirt was well below the knees. So Ervina was quite a novelty. So that was the nature of my activities at that time. But I did discuss with the then Portuguese governor, Fernando Alves Aldeia, a very good man, very liberal. He had been military here before, then went to Portugal, then they sent him back as governor. Back then there was some tensions in the border, particularly Oikusi area with NTT, to do with border crossing. Some cattle from our side allegedly walk over, the cattle walk over to the other side. Our people get upset, go and get the cattle back, and vice versa. So more or less this led to some problems. So I told the Portuguese governor, I think you should invite the governor of NTT to visit. Of course, I knew, although I was only 19 or 20 at the time, but of course the Portuguese knew better and the Indonesians knew better. You don't handle these things, provincial capital to provincial capital, or provincial governor to provincial governor. You deal with the capital. So the idea was sent to Lisbon. Lisbon then contact through, I think at the time they didn't have the embassy. They probably had a chargé d'affaires in Jakarta. So the two capitals agreed. Gubernur El Tari came to the then Portuguese Timor. If you ever find time to visit my gallery in Farol, there is a little corner there devoted to the visit to Dili by Gubernur El Tari when he was received by Governor Fernando Alves Aldeia. So I went to Kupang a few times over the years, and then went to Jakarta. First time was in June '74. On my own, no money. Went to Kupang first to seek advice from El Tari, and he even paid my airfare to Jakarta. He assigned one of his top aides called Luis Taoli, and people who knew about NTT, who knew about, they said he was a Bakin agent. Bakin was an intelligence service. It's funny, when you are in a small town like Kupang, or you're a small town like Dili, even if you're not an intelligent officer, you like people to think you're an intelligent officer, because that make you important. So I don't know whether he was actually Bakin or not. El Tari told him in front of me, you accompany Ramos to Jakarta. Don't let anyone bad harm him. So Luis Taoli came with me, dropped me in the hotel in Jakarta, lodgement, not hotel, lodgement, very nice, an old Dutch colonial house, it looked like. And he was supposed to look after me, but the whole week I was in Jakarta, he disappeared. Of course, coming from a boring Kupang at the time, or boring Dili, you find yourself in Jakarta. So you disappear into the nightlife of Jakarta. So much for being a Bakin agent. But on my own, with the help of Agus Barengwan, at the time young journalist of Compass, Hari Kawilaran, young journalist of Sinar Harapan, with Sabang Siajian of Sinar Harapan also, and then Tempo people, Jos Adijondro. Tempo had just been created, I think, 73, 71. So their office was a very small office, and then we ate downstairs in Warung. We had lunch there. And then they interviewed me. I was made into cover of Tempo magazine, 15 June 74. You can see it in my gallery when you don't have anything better to do in Delhi. You can go to the gallery and you see the cover of Tempo. So that's my relationship way back all these years with Indonesia. And I met Adam Malik, Pa Malik, very famous diplomat. He was the one surviving foreign minister who took part in the Bandung conference, particular in the founding of ASEAN, more in the founding of ASEAN in Bangkok, and met with him. And even though I was very young, by then I was 24, I think, zero experience, broken English, I managed to persuade Adam Malik to write to me a letter. Everything that we discussed, I told him, Your Excellency, everything you said, could you put in a letter to me so that I can read out back in Timor-Leste, in Portuguese? And he did. Very detailed letter, which is in the gallery. So I met him actually 3 times. The 3rd time was just to get the letter from him. Freshly typed, freshly delivered, signed in front of me when his secretary brought the letter. So with all of that, I obviously wanted to go to Jakarta for Jakarta Post anniversary, a paper that survived all these years, you know, from the years of living dangerously, like in the film played by Sigourney Weaver, and I don't remember the others, I just remember Sigourney Weaver. If you know Sigourney Weaver, you understand why I only remember Sigourney Weaver. There was one great other actor, I don't remember the name. So Jakarta Post survived all these years, and I was my main English language reading over the years. Always very, even in the circumstances, you know, of the Suharto era, very independent-minded, very well, the editorials. So I went for that, and they gave a talk on democracy in Southeast Asia, or in Asia. And I don't know if any of you had followed it, but so for those who have not followed, I summarize what I said. Obviously, I go by what Freedom House and the economists of you, they say Timor-Leste is the best functioning democracy in Southeast Asia. That poses one uncomfortable situation. If Timor-Leste is the best functioning democracy in Southeast Asia, I wonder how are other democracies. And because our democracy is very free and so on, but to call it the best functioning democracy, I think they don't know too well our democracy. But it's free, zero political violence, elections, as you know, results are accepted almost promptly, etc., multi-party and all of that. But also I said, I'm not a fanatic Democrat. I'm not a pure liberal. I am a liberal Democrat, but not a pure one that would claim the multi-party democracy as inspired by the Western experience is the best. There is no other option. I said, well, I'm sorry, but what the purpose of democracy and democratic institutions and political institutions, state institutions, if not to serve the people? And to serve the people is to provide the best possible education, the best possible health, job opportunities for everybody, equality, equity, and all of that. If democracy is not obligated to do that, well, I'm sorry, I don't think it's the best, the only doctrine or the best option for anyone. Because for me, as human being, seeing so much injustice in my country, around the world, I judge by, yes, that people are free, people are not abused, arrested for disagreeing with those in office, but a government that delivers on all the issues or things that I just mentioned. If there is a benevolent, a great sheikh, a great prince, a great king, that does exactly what a democracy is supposed to do, well, I say long live the king. And if I hear of a so-called autocratic regime that does everything that a democracy is supposed to do, deliver peace, security, stability, tranquility, protection of people, education, health, long live the autocrat leader. Because there are other incredibly chaotic, incompetent, corrupt democracies that don't deliver. And when democracy doesn't deliver, well, that's when two classes of demagogues emerge. One, right-wing demagogues, but also left-wing demagogues, because often when we talk as if demagogues exist only at the right. No, we have known for all our lives that there are demagogues that make false promises on both. The left promise a workers' paradise. The right also actually they talk on behalf of workers. So I prefer not to make any judgment on the political choices people make, except when human rights are completely disrespected. Torture, that's the worst, the worst thing that can happen. Over the years, I had a great relationship with a group in France called SOS Torture, to campaign against torture. And I used to say back then, 20, 30 years ago, the world would be already a great place if only we don't have to change all the political systems, but only if we manage to end torture. That everybody, left and right, democracy and non, we agree, at least in one, no torture of a human being. That already would be a great. So that's, in summary, my remarks. Indonesia, in my view, what a tremendous success in the transition from 98, 99, 2000, 2001, the critical years. What a great transition to what it is today. You can read the data on Indonesian economy. If my mind, my brains don't fail me, they have 30,000 newspapers. They have more than 100 TV channels. And so more than 30,000 newspapers, more than 100 TV channels, and radios, thousands of radios all over. And it is part of that, that when with friends around the world, we discuss about the spread of extremism ideologies. Indonesia has very little of that. And why? Because people watch the news of extremism elsewhere in the world. And the Indonesians are super pragmatic. They say, this is what we want for our country. So they have survived, thrived all these years. Because in Indonesia, Indonesians are being, they demand more democracy, more openness. And as an outsider, I don't know what is the problem they're talking about, because you are in Indonesia, it's absolutely, you read the newspapers, and Jakarta Post, so that's, and to say the same elsewhere in Southeast Asia, the changes that occur throughout the rest of Southeast Asia. Are there setbacks? Yes. You just ask the Americans about setbacks in United States democracy. Yes, they will say, my friends in the US will say, and I quote names only because so that people don't think that I'm being, why single out the United States? Well, one evening I was in New York, I got a phone call from Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown was then governor of California. He heard I was in the US. Invited me to have dinner with him. God can imagine, so went all the way to Sacramento, not even San Francisco, Los Angeles, Sacramento, that's the state capital of California. So went all the way to California, to Sacramento, to have a dinner with him. He just arrived back from San Francisco, driving, arrived, he cooked 2 types of spaghettis, and me and him and his wife had dinner. Jerry Brown, I had known before. He was governor before, previous term was very young, presidential candidate, radio journalist. He once interviewed me in his quality as a radio journalist. And if you hear that, he and many others, they'll say, yeah, serious challenges. But also there are the great American institutions. The political culture, the democratic culture, the justice system that protect democracy against challenge from anyone. But the same in Europe and so on. So democracies are not guaranteed. That's what I said in my speech. I learned in life not to take anything for granted. We don't take democracy for granted. We should not take democracy for granted in Timor-Leste. As in love, don't take anything for granted. A beautiful, romantic love with promises of eternal loyalty, and suddenly you find a lawyer, and the most you can expect is amicable separation. So this happens all the time. So why should I say democracy? Only democracy is the one that cannot fail. Well, the right-wing systems also fail. Well, Donald Trump just learned this in the US. He had only 4 years. And not so dramatic. So I was telling the Indonesians, democracy is progress, democracy has setbacks, and we know those are liberals or Democrats. We have celebrated many victories against extremism. Brazil, I was very happy to have gone to Brazil for Lula's inauguration on 1st January 2003, yeah, 2003. And I have to tell you people, not many people back then, when Lula was chased by politicized judges, I spoke out publicly. I wrote for Wall Street International magazine, interviews in Brazil, supporting Lula publicly, and denouncing that so-called investigative judge that was celebrated in Washington as a great hero of fighting corruption. Well, a few months later, he was fired, that judge. Moro, Mr. Moro. What a farce he was. So I was very happy to join Lula in his third inauguration. And the inauguration was a carnival, in a positive way, carnival of democracy. Was uneventful in terms of no violence and so on. But the struggle goes on. So this is applicable in so many continents. And, but you're here, and some of you probably impatient, you say, can you move on to ASEAN, please? So I'm a mind reader. I look at you, I know exactly who you think. So ASEAN, on 29th July, my weekly meeting with Prime Minister Shanano, that was, in the past was also always a Thursday weekly meeting, previous presidents, whenever. So we met, and that was the meeting we, among other things, but importantly, we discussed options, ideas of timing of joining ASEAN. A few months ago, a year ago, was this possibility of joining in 2023, in September. There was some were talking about that, and not only us, some in ASEAN. And we began to be worried about joining 2023. And I think some ASEAN ambassadors here and who heard me so often demanding access to ASEAN. And then suddenly I toned down my language. I think that they were smiling or laughing because I said, oh, now he's not so in a hurry. Because suddenly we feel the weight of the responsibilities. When you look at the first, the summit in Phnom Penh was great. Timor-Leste is admitted in principle as the 11th member. Then in May, in Labuan Bajo, the summit approved a roadmap for Timor-Leste towards Timor-Leste full participation that has several milestones to go through, to accomplish. Treaties, regulations, and not only signing the treaties and regulations, but then reform of our laws to adapt to ASEAN standards, etc., etc. That's when we realize how difficult it is. And that's when Mount Bolsonaro very skeptical about it, whether we have the means, the ability to do it. And that's what he raised in his own speech. He raised with me several times, and so we both discussed 2023. It would be we'll be all completely stressed out. Then we talked about 2024, and we talked about 25th. He said 2025 would he was relieved and said yes, that we could do it 2025. So that's the it doesn't mean necessarily that what we want is what ASEAN leaders will decide. ASEAN leaders, if they decide any other year, 2026, 27, well, we go along with it because they are the owners of the home, of the house, and they invite you whenever they feel ready to open the gates for. But regardless of that, when, as observers, we already participating in all the meetings. The President or Prime Minister of Timor-Leste is invited to ASEAN Summit, take part, speak, and also participate in the conversation with the dialogue partners. It means literally that we are members. Of course, there is one proviso there that no right to vote. No? Well, in ASEAN, they don't vote anyway. So, because like in the European Union, at least initially, everything adopted by consensus. And which is the most frustrating for the European Union is precisely one little country in European bloc, even the best, the decision of Germany or France and so on. So, but that's how they established to really create, otherwise, yeah, if everyone can, if you vote different ways, weaken the organization. So we learn from the European Union the difficulties, the complexities of uniting a bloc on so many complicated issues. And look at the ASEAN, yeah, I completely agree with consensus decisions. Otherwise, kill the organization. And so, we will not vote anyway. So, we will have all the privileges without real responsibilities. If we are observers, well, we'll find ways not to have to do certain things. We say, sorry, we are just observers. And we could live on with being observers for quite a while. Because the usefulness is that we participate in the summits. We can talk in the summit meeting. We have a chance to speak. We talk in the dialogue partners. We're given a chance to talk. So what else do we need? So I'm not in a, we say, between me and Mr. Shanana, 2025 would be the ideal. We would have it preferred during Indonesian presidency, because that's what we have argued before, for obvious reasons. Would be the perfect timing during Indonesian presidency. Indonesia was among the countries that in ASEAN that immediately day one supported. There are others. I never heard from a single ASEAN country that Timor-Leste does not classify to join ASEAN. Some, in frankness, expressed to me their concerns about whether Timor-Leste could absorb the intensity of the meetings, of the work. Even way back when the meetings, I remember once, Foreign Minister Jayakumar of Singapore, in a meeting which I attended when I was Foreign Minister, I think was in Bangkok, he was complaining about too many ASEAN meetings. He said 500 meetings. That's a lot. But now apparently it's more than 1,000 meetings. And it is not that they enjoy inventing meetings, but it is absolutely necessary to align all the country's policies for a proper, complete regional integration. Is Timor ready for that? So in 2023, we were hoping we would, only because highly symbolic with Indonesia. And, That's not been the case. Partly fortunate for Timor-Leste. So if not 23, why we had to rush to 24? Maybe a bit more safely, comfortably, we say 2025. This is what I discussed with Mount Bolsonaro, and Mount Bolsonaro, in following the meeting with me in the Council of Ministers, he also stated this in the Council of Ministers 2025, our joining ASEAN. Anything else you might have heard, you should disregard. As anything I say that you might be surprised, don't think it was me, because I have a twin brother. He often speak out without my knowledge or without interpreting his twin brother properly. And we are exactly the same person. Actually, let me tell you, I have a younger brother. I don't mention his name because he can be embarrassed, although he's never embarrassed for anything. He does interpretation work, occasionally. And he never really had a job all his life. But often people ask him to translate things. He speaks English, Bahasa, Portuguese, Tetum, etc., etc. So one day he was doing a simultaneous translation in a conference in Hotel Timor. And I was speaking. I think I was speaking in Portuguese. He was translating from the room, from the booth. And people look at me, they say, he's speaking in Portuguese. What is well, it was my brother. So if anything different that I might say in the future or I said in the past, blame my brother. And he looked exactly like me. So he actually doesn't. So anyway, I promise that I only make these introductory remarks. I think the position is absolutely clear. This is a national consensus that has developed over many, many years. It's not something overnight. Formally, 2011, during the government of Prime Minister Xanana Gusmão, in the first majority government that CNRT with the coalition had, from 2007 to 2012. 2011, a letter was submitted to the then chairman of ASEAN, Indonesia, I think was 2011, Susilo Bambang Widiono. So these, and we have had discussions over the years. So it is no detail was left unstudied or untouched. And it is foreign policy in our constitution, is a responsibility of the president, parliament, and the government, the prime minister. So it's a joint collective responsibility decision. And this took years of the admission to ASEAN didn't take much discussion among the leadership. Yes, it's important, very important, and it doesn't take an Einstein to understand the importance of regional integration. Our regional integration happened in itself. How? What is a regional integration? Well, trade. Look at our data, statistics of trade. You, obviously, you import, you export primarily with your neighbors. Look at the merchandise in Delhi. Look at people's movements. Would you believe that the 2020 data by 31st December 2020, I'm telling you this because when COVID happened, and I told in a meeting, very early on, at the Ministério de Saúde, about the movement in our border. Well, those who deal with border at the meeting didn't know this figure. And I said, in end of 2018, that's the data I had at the time, 1,700,000 entries from East Timor into Indonesia. You should know our IOM representative, she has all the figures of this kind of, so it would be 1.7 million entries to Indonesia. Yeah. And an academic, Timorese academic, he sent me an analysis of that. He said, this means more than $100 million or 200 million, I don't remember the figure he mentioned, that Timorese visitors live in Indonesia every year. My comment to him, that's nonsense. You know, he's using an Australian, a Singaporean spend $200 a day in Indonesia. Well, we think a Timorese would spend $200 a day in Indonesia. No. A majority of these are multiple entries in the border area, in and out, many times. That's why we reach 1.7 more than the whole population of Timor-Leste. Airplanes also usually full before COVID. 28,000, one figure I got at the time, every month. And, not a lot if you're talking about Australia or Singapore, but going to Indonesia. But for Timor, 28,000. How much a Timorese would spend? My calculation, knowing my compatriots, maybe $20 a day, maximum. They go and stay with families, friends in Atamua, in Kupang, in Bali, in Georgia, or wherever they go. B, they will go to the warungs that you eat for 50 cents. But even with the lowest estimate, yeah, it's still a lot of money. I think my estimate was $40 million that go into Indonesia just for this. The number one entry, I think, is, if I'm not mistaken, is Singapore or Malaysia to Indonesia. Timor was number 3 of all countries visiting Indonesia. And and that is in numbers, not a percentage, not proportional per capita. No, that's you want more regional integration than that. People's movement, thousands of Timorese studying in Indonesia, but not only in Indonesia, across Southeast Asia, Philippines. Over the years we had hundreds. I was the one who signed off with Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo. The very first time we signed the ARF, ASEAN, the Treaty on Peace and Security. It was with Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, was I think in 2006. Soon after, 100 Timorese students arrived in one go in Philippines to study. 100 arrived in one go in Thailand, went to 4 different universities. These were Timor-Leste own scholarship called Fundo Capacitação Recursos Humanos. $30 million a year at the time. Hundreds went to Indonesia, but under government scholarship to selected universities chosen jointly by Timor government and the universities. It is not part of the random that individual going on their own to Indonesia to study. 100 to Thailand, including to Asia Institute of Technology in Thailand. Philippines, 4 of the best. Indonesia, some of the best. More than 200 in Australia. At one point, we had more Timorese studying in Australia under Timorese scholarship than Australian government scholarships. Several hundred in Portugal, Brazil, a lot. I'm surprised actually with the number of Timorese who graduated in Brazil at PhD level. Very few in the United States, very few in New Zealand. 800 Timorese went through training in Singapore all these years. Many, Japan. I was in Japan visiting when 4 Timorese from a defense force went to the Japanese Navy Academy. I didn't believe they could survive the Japanese Navy Academy. So I saw them when they arrived. I went to visit that Navy Academy. I said, because I know the rigor of Japanese universities and so on. I wouldn't survive a Japanese university. And I told them, imi liu kari come curso na admireni. So I'm Saidula Koto. They completed the training. They have to be really very good. And we have Timorese who have done PhD in Japan, in Germany, postdoctorate in the United States, and everywhere. So, but not yet ready. Still require much more. And that's why we said 2024 would be, 5th would be the ideal. Deputy Foreign Minister Milena Rangel will share with you some of the practical things that we have done all these last few years, particularly the last few months since the roadmap was adopted. I thank you.
Excelência, Sr. Presidente, Comandante Forças Armadas, Sr. Ministros, Vice-Ministros, também a liderança nacional, Balo Mote Sala, distintas deputadas, e Honorable Ambassadors, Representative of International Organization in Timor-Leste, United Nations representative. It's such a great pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to share with you our national agenda on accession to ASEAN, particularly to address the objective, criteria-based roadmap for Timor-Leste full membership in ASEAN. Mr. President, allow me if I can go through the milestones and inform where we are today. But to start, I would like to, first of all, I'd like to join our leaders in congratulating our dear brothers and sisters in ASEAN on the 56th birthday, one of the most successful regional groupings, on the 8th of August, a few days ago. Actually, 2 days ago, very recent. I would also like to take this opportunity to express our deep appreciation to ASEAN member states for your unwavering support to Timor-Leste process of applying and acceding to ASEAN. I'd like to wish the best success to Indonesia chairmanship in this year under the theme of ASEAN Matter Epicentrum of Growth. Thank you for your strong support as you all follow at the 40th and 41st ASEAN Summit, President just also mentioned just now. In Cambodia in November 2022, we have been admitted in principle as an 11th member of ASEAN, granted observer status, and allowed to participate in all ASEAN meetings, including summit and plenaries. And early this year, on the May, in Labuan Bajo, we have also received the adopted roadmap for Timor-Leste full membership. Timor-Leste has been in the process of national building, strengthening institutions and economic resilience. Implementing the roadmap for Timor-Leste ASEAN full membership provide us with an opportunity